Today it's Easter Saturday. It's the day after the disciples have seen Jesus crucified and seen him buried in a tomb. Their hero is gone. You know, so often as Christians, we rush into the Sunday and we don't take time to sort of pause in the Saturday. And so that's what we want to do today, pause and reflect on Easter Saturday.
Yeah, and I've been pondering what it would have felt like maybe for the disciples on that Easter Saturday. It reminded me of a situation I found myself in a few years ago. We had planned for me to fly to Melbourne to surprise my really good friend Alina. I was so excited. She had no idea I was going. She'd just had a baby. I was going to meet her new baby, and I had so many things planned that I was super excited about. And as we always do, the night before a flight, I went to check in online, and lo and behold, a message pops up on the screen and says, "You can't check in. You need to talk to a member of staff at the airport." So immediately I panicked. We went down to the airport straight away because we didn't want to risk leaving it till the morning. And we're on British passports, which means we need a visa to fly to Australia, which we knew. And Simon had kindly filled in my visa application for me. Super helpful.
So kind.
If he hadn't filled in one of our daughter's birth dates instead of my birth date on the visa application.
Apparently they're like picky over details there.
Yeah, so I didn't have a visa, so I was unable to check in, unable to fly, unable to go on this trip that I was so excited about. And so all that I had hoped to do, all that I was so excited and expected about was gone in that moment.
That was dark, let's be honest. I felt awful. And but I think that is a good example in terms of what it looks like to sort of sit in that experience of loss. And we see the disciples doing a little bit of the same, reflecting on how that day felt. We find a little glimpse of it in Luke 24, verse 21, where two of them were walking along on the road, and they say, "But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel." These guys had followed Jesus around for 3 years. They'd heard him speak. They'd seen what he could do. And they hoped that in him there would be this prosperous, incredible future for Israel. All of their hopes rested on him. And now they had seen him die. And with that death, all of those hopes came crashing down. And it's like today, it's good for us to go to sit in that moment, that moment of loss, and say, where would we be without Jesus?
Yeah, it's hard when I think about that question. It's hard for me to imagine what would my life be like if Jesus hadn't risen from the dead. I was brought up in church. I don't remember a day when I didn't know who Jesus was. But if I force myself to sit in that place, if I ask myself the question, what if Jesus didn't rise from the dead? It feels hopeless.
Right.
And it feels lonely, because if Jesus didn't rise, there's no salvation.
Right.
There's no forgiveness for my sin. There's no relationship with the Father. And so when I imagine my life without Jesus, it feels empty and without purpose and without hope.
Wow. And I think it's also true that if somebody's never come to believe in Jesus, I think we experience something of the same, because all of us look at the world, read the news or experience things in the people around us, or even within ourselves, that we go, that is not the way it should be. We have hopes for something being the way it should be. And I think we find ourselves incredibly frustrated when we're incapable, powerless even, to bring that about. When we find ourselves frustrated at not being able to bring about that world, or when we find ourselves maybe searching in all the wrong places for that sense of fulfillment. I wonder if that's a bit like that Easter Saturday feeling. We've got this hope of what things could be, but the things we're pursuing don't get us there, or we can't, work that out. And I think that's a little bit of that sort of Easter Saturday, pretending like the Sunday isn't coming.
Yeah. You might be wondering what happened with my trip to Melbourne.
Well, I'm
and
alive.
my visa story.
So that does give you a hint.
I went straight home from the airport. I got on the computer. I applied for my visa with my correct date of birth this time. And thankfully, a few minutes later, it came through. I was able to go and check in the morning. I got to surprise Helena. I got to go on my trip. I got to go and do all the things I had been hoping to do. And actually, I think I appreciated the trip more because I'd faced the reality that it might not happen.
Right.
And that's the joy of Easter Sunday, right? And so we'd love to encourage you to tune in online tomorrow or join us in one of our gatherings to celebrate the resurrection on Easter Sunday. But before we go there, let's not lose the opportunity of sitting in these moments today. Like I discovered that the joy was even greater when I'd felt that sense of loss. We want to encourage every one of you today to take some time to reflect on and sit in the discomfort of that day before the resurrection and genuinely search your heart over where you would be now if Jesus hadn't risen from the dead.